Hello there, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of TA with MK. My name is MK, and it is that time of year again where the beanie comes back out because, at least where I live in the Northwest United States, is freaking cold, or has been for about the past couple days, and the weather forecast isn't looking, great for the coming days either, so I think our good summer and fall days are behind us, and yeah, just going to be dealing with that from now on. But anyway, as far as our video goes today, there's quite a bit actually I want to talk about, but I'm going to try to keep the video under 15 minutes. Basically, what I'm noticing is that some altcoins randomly, like Litecoin a few days back, Band, a few of these coins have kind of been taking off, which doesn't make a lot of sense, just, on the surface, when you look at the fact that Bitcoin has done mostly nothing ever since it, broke back above 20K. It's just been kind of in a new range, which is a good thing, but it's not like Bitcoin's, taking off per se. So we're going to talk about that, some reasons for that, to be the case, and maybe look at a few charts of what could be some good trades to keep an eye out for this coming weekend. And if that sounds interesting to you, please remember to like and subscribe. Let's go. It's TA with MK. It's TA with MK. All right, so before we dive into like a DXY update and a Bitcoin, quick update on Bitcoin, and then of course a couple coins that I'll be watching, I just want to kind of give a reminder of the news catalyst that we have coming up for the rest of this this month, or at least in the next week or so. Now, the one on the top here, November 2nd, that of course was yesterday. That was the FOMC meeting. 75 basis point rate hike was announced. Which was exactly what the market expected. It would have been very bullish had they decided to do something like a 50. Of course, it would have been bearish if they went the other way, but ultimately it was what the market expected, so that's why you didn't see a whole lot outside of just regular volatility that happens anytime there's news catalysts. The next things to look out for is tomorrow. There's the unemployment rate will be released, and then another big one will be November 10th when the CPI inflation data is released. Yeah, anyway, so I wanted to hop over to the DXY real quick. This is the daily chart, and just kind of go over or give a kind of an update to the idea that I spoke about in my last video. I believe I put it out Sunday, where I spoke about the idea. It was option A, option B, or scenario A, scenario B. And in scenario A, I spoke about the idea that the DXY would pump back up to this trend line or potential trend line of resistance, or at the very least back up here to this resistance level that was overhead. It's where it's at right now, right around the 112 to 113 area that I spoke about in that video. The question is, at this point, does it see another lower high? Here's a high, lower high. That's actually kind of like a double top there, but ultimately we still are trending down. Do we see a rejection here, which is what we want for some of these ideas that we're going to go over in the rest of the video to play out? But again, as always, you need to be cautious and have a scenario A, scenario B, which right now we are at resistance. So the question is, do we break out, retest and trend higher? Because if so, we'll be looking for a retest of the 114. Maybe it even does push higher in the short term, and we see something up to the 115, 115 and a half. This will likely bring Bitcoin back down somewhere between, I would say, 18K and 19K ultimately, and we'll be keeping an eye out for that. Or do we get the rejection, which I'm kind of looking for at this point? I don't know that a lot of other YouTubers are. I'm not sure. I haven't really been following up today on kind of what the general Twitter talk is of the day. But in my personal opinion, a rejection here would make sense, and maybe one drive lower. So far we've put in a low and a lower low. Can we get the drive lower that I spoke about in my last video? Maybe something back down here in this area, which could be a double bottom, and then maybe the DXY does push higher later. But maybe over the next, few days to a week, could see a revisit of back down here at the support level of around 109, 110. So that's something we'll be looking for the other ideas in this video to play out, but just be cautious and understand that if we flip this 113 as support, there's a good chance we're headed back up to somewhere between 114 and a half and probably 115 and a half. So keep an eye out for that. And then that brings us over to the S&P 500. This is the E-mini futures trading chart. Just a kind of quick update here. So this was the key level that we were looking for a break above if we wanted to see some continuation this past week. However, we did get rejected. In fact, if you zoom in, there is a little double top right here. Price action, got rejected. even confirmed it with the bearish retest down here. You know, gave you a measured move just down here somewhere, which clearly it's even below that at this point. But what we're looking for at this point would be something like an oversold bounce, something that gives us some short term, whether it be a few days or a week worth of decent trading. Even a few days would be good at this point going into the weekend, because what you ultimately have here is you had kind of this double bottom I was looking out for, which had a neckline up here. Well, we've lost that at this point. This was the retest of that, which should have had a measured move up here somewhere. But of course, with some of the news catalysts and things coming out, ultimately we didn't get that kind of a move to the upside. We saw this rejection here, and now we're headed down. However, the measured move out of this rising wedge I have drawn on the chart really is not too far from playing out. Question is, does it play out all at once? Back down here kind of to the support level, which would be where we look for kind of a bigger bounce back down around 3,600. Does that play out right now the rest of the way? In which case we'll talk about that on the Bitcoin chart, what that might look like. Or do we maybe see a little oversold bounce in the short term? Because if you go over here to the indicators down here, the stochastic RSI down here looks like it wants to leave this kind of oversold area down here. And then same with the RSI, it's down here at about the 32. This is the 4-hour chart, by the way, but you're down here at about the 32 level, which you can kind of see is reaching pretty oversold territory. That being said, it could still make one drive lower before we see a bounce. And if it does that, you know, we'll see altcoins and especially Bitcoin bleed in the short term. Question is, like I said, do we see a bounce before that? Something like maybe up to here to retest this level back as resistance, and then down to here. Those would kind of be the two things we're looking out for, which will carry over now to the Bitcoin chart. And here we are. This is the Bitcoin CME chart. This is the 4-hour chart we're focusing on right now. Kind of some lower time frame things. Sunday is usually when I go over the bigger ideas. And I know a lot of people on Twitter, other YouTubers are really, I guess, worried or talking about, okay, if we lose this support level of 20K, that we might be headed to new lows. I don't know that I buy that just yet. It's definitely possible. Anything's possible, and I'll be prepared for that if it happens. But what does scare me in the short term is that really, even though it's not perfect, we kind of have more or less this descending triangle, which is a bearish pattern. It just basically means you're putting in lower highs, but your support levels more or less kind of the same area. And it has a, I believe it's about a 68% chance of breaking to the downside. It just means that this pattern, has a higher probability of breaking to the downside. And you have a way of coming up with a measured move for a pattern like this. We'll kind of go on the conservative side here. But, if this were to break down, you could see something like price action revisiting 19K, which is also what I spoke about in my video I put out Sunday as being kind of my scenario A, that if the DXY pushed higher. Now, again, in that video, I expected this move up to where we're at now to be the catalyst that would have pushed Bitcoin down to this 19,000 level, or at least 19.5. Surprisingly, Bitcoin's held up well so far. However, it may just be that. It may just be holding up so far. It very easily could be that even if the DXY only pushes a little bit higher, maybe it pushes back up to here, finds some resistance in these areas, and then, decides to roll over, which would be good. That could be just enough for Bitcoin to kind of break the back and, head back down to this measured move that we spoke about down here at 19,000. But the longer this holds up, the better to me as far as the next month's outlook. But in the short term, could it lose the support, head back down here? That's very, very realistic. And so when we jump ahead to talk about the two setups that I'm watching as far as altcoins, I'll give you the scenarios for those as well, because I do think both coins we're going to talk about at the end of this video have some good upside, or at least good potential, as long as you enter at the right time, because, timing your entry is everything, really, when it comes to trading or even investing short term. So the first coin we're going to talk about real quick is CHAINLINK, and I'm admittedly not a fundamental guy, at least not great at that, something I've been, striving to learn more. But from what I hear, and from the little bit the research that I've done, CHAINLINK is a pretty much a blue chip, very important coin to crypto. And so, anytime a coin like this has news, I take note of it, because it's not as risky, in my opinion, as trading some, dog crap coin, right? So, anyway, CHAINLINK, which I've notated here, which uses Oracle networks to provide secure access to real-world data for Web3 apps, has unveiled that its long-awaited staking rewards are set to go live in December. So that's the news catalyst that I would, be using to eye a potential run-up at some point in the coming weeks to month for Chainlink. Okay then, so what does the chart look like? Well, this is just kind of zoomed way out on the daily. This is just kind of a large falling wedge potentially that's been in, but really where price action matters to me is more zoomed in here. And the reason I say that is you can kind of see that it has this trend line here that's more or less been acting as support. I always say everything in my eyes is basically a zone. That'd be no different here if you bought out this little rotated rectangle and kind of just did something like this. You know, put that there on the chart. You can see that we've been putting in a series of higher lows. Now, on the flip side of that, not so great. You'd kind of have a series of, well, same highs here, basically, right? So it's not an ascending triangle. It's not really a descending triangle. I mean, it's not really anything. It's more or less a zone. That's the thing. The bottom side of the range is basically down here at about 630. The top side at the moment is up a little over $9, maybe $9.20 ish, right? So what we're looking for is a run up at some point in the coming weeks for this coin based on the news that's launching sometime. I didn't see a specific date, but sometime in December, right? Well, this would just be a range play for me. Right now, we're kind of at the middle of the range. Now, this is the daily. What would be nice to see is a confirmed break of this 200 moving average to kind of get a push up here to this top side of around, $9 at least, around there. Question is, does that happen first, or do we get the breakdown that follows Bitcoin because Bitcoin heads back down to 19K, and you get a bounce out of, or a pullback out of Chainlink back down here to, sub $7, something like 650 to 675. Now, this is what I would look for as a great entry. I would set some alerts down there at around, 650 to 675 range. I think anything in there would make sense for a pullback in the short term, maybe even as low as $6 out of Chainlink. And then at that point, maybe some consolidation. Then if Bitcoin bounces after that, then maybe you get the run up then out of Chainlink. Other thing I'd be looking for, obviously, would be, if the DXY begins to roll over the next day or two, and you see Chainlink break $8 and hold it on a daily candle, at that point you could trade that back up there. My targets for this would be completely based on, what Bitcoin does over the next, 2 to 3 days or 24 to 48 hours. Naturally, if it comes back down here to the bottom side of the range, like I said, somewhere around 650, you could scoop that up and you'd be looking for, the targets would be back up here between $8 and $9, right? And if you were to get the full bounce out of that back up to the $9 range, it could be as much as a 25 to 30% trade. Now, granted, if it breaks out sooner than later, I would likely be looking for maybe just the move up here, maybe in the short term to about a 20% trade. Now, granted, everything would change if it broke out and flipped this area of $9, $9.20 as, support. Then you'd have targets clear up here around $12. But we're not going to talk about that in this video. We're focused more on the short term. So I will keep you guys posted. And then this last one that we're going to go over briefly is MATIC. Now, there was some news that came out that MATIC partnered with Instagram and JP Morgan. I don't have it to post on the chart right now. I could have looked it up, but you'll just have to take my word for it or go Google it yourself. I believe they did some sort of a transaction using MATIC, JP Morgan that is. It was pretty big news. So the news of that has already passed, and so has the partnership of with Instagram. And a lot of times there's the buy the rumor, sell the news. However, I think this one, being as big of a company as it is, JP Morgan, and obviously if they've partnered with Instagram, these are huge companies, to where, it may have a temporary sell-off, which it hasn't yet, and then, maybe a consolidation phase and then a bigger move to the upside, or it may just even continue to gain strength and go to the upside. Now, again, Bitcoin will probably determine ultimately what this does, but the chart looks pretty good. I kind of have it zoomed out right now just so you can kind of see kind of the key levels. I mean, clearly you had this entire time period where it was putting in higher lows, and then it broke down, flipped this resistance, and has basically been, going down since, just like the rest of the market. However, it bounced off of this key area down here at about 35 cents, and then reflipped an area back here, if you can see if my head's not in the way, that used to be support at around 70 cents. It flipped it back as support back here in July, in midsummer. And now it's just kind of in a zone where the lower side of the zone is the lower 70 cents range to the top side of the zone, which is basically $1. What I'd be looking for some good upside and some safe trading, as safe as you could be, at least in the bear market, especially with the news that this coin has, would be if we can break and flip this dollar area. You flip this dollar area, then I would expect to move back up here to this previous support, which is obviously going to be resistance now. That's up here at about $1.25-ish, just under, $1.24. And, that could represent another, bear market, for the bear market anyway, a good little 15 to 20% rally, which, depending on how much you're trading with, could be a pretty good little short-term trade. Doesn't mean that has to be the highest it goes. It's just, you're going to see at least a pullback at that area based naturally on just the level of resistance it'll be running into. Now, again, like Link, if we see a pullback out of Bitcoin in the short term, which is something that is very, very, very likely, in fact, maybe from a probabilistic standpoint, if that's a word, even maybe, might be what I would lean towards happening anyway. Well, same thing as Link. It doesn't mean I'd be scared to trade this coin. It just means I might get an even better entry. And what I would be looking for in that case is you can kind of see here on the daily chart that it flipped and retested some of these moving averages down here, and especially this yellow one here, which is the 200 simple, which right now sits at about 79 cents. Well, if you get a pullback out of Bitcoin and you get any sort of higher low back down here, somewhere between 80, we'll call it 85 and 80 cents, that would be, to me, a dream entry, assuming the whole market doesn't collapse, of course, on some news or something. And at that point, maybe you just get another higher low and then another drive up as this kind of completes this range. And maybe, in the next couple of weeks, you finally get the bigger breakout. So those would be my targets. Now, again, if you get a pullback, look for entry down there, set some alerts between 85 cents and 80. I think anywhere in that range would be a pretty good entry. You'll just have to be very, very patient. I would say the biggest takeaway from today's video is set some alerts on the DXY, as I think it has the trickle-down effect that affects everything else. Not always on the 5, 10-minute, 15-minute charts, but ultimately it's at a key level, which if over the next day or two it breaks above, if we start seeing the DXY close 4-hour candles and above, back above 113, look for that pullback out of Bitcoin back to 19K. Maybe a little above it bounces or whatever, right? If it gets rejected, if you start seeing, 4-hour candles closing back below 112.5, then that probably verifies that we've been rejected at the 113 level. At that point, Bitcoin probably consolidates and you see the upside out of these coins. So remember to join my Telegram group as well. There's always that link in the description if you want some more up-to-date, analysis. And that should about wrap it up for today. As always, if you guys are enjoying the content, please do me a favor and remember to like and subscribe. We'll catch you tomorrow. It's TIMECODES.